introduce you to an unpacking of a typical shaman box. This is Magar Shaman. It's almost complete. It's got needs a bit of repair. It's something I picked up about a year and a half ago, and there's lots of variety, so it's a particularly interesting box. It would still need its drum and a few other pieces, maybe a large knife, but there's lots and lots of variety with the ferbers and the whole costume. The bell chain needs a little bit of repair, so I'll begin to unpack and explain the items as we go. So I've already taken the lid off because everything was packed right down, so I've got this ready to explain it a bit. So here we have a really extremely beautiful hand crocheted bag holding all their sacred stones. So this piece is a prehistoric axe head made out of some very hard stone. Quite often amongst the shaman pieces, the shaman boxes, you find these axe heads, and they sometimes represent the sort of Shivic male power, but they're seen as holding a type of energy and value, and also as a connection to the sort of human history, to their tribe and to the ancestral groups. And so very nice to have that amongst. And then there's a whole, I'll tip them all out actually so I can show you. There's a whole variety of crystals and some other little bits of stone that I'm not sure what they are. In my conversations with various shaman, I've had a number of people reveal to me how they had dreams of where they would find a particular crystal. So sometimes they use the crystals like further as well, and sometimes they also get knowledge from the crystals, so they communicate with the crystals. So I have a friend, Parvati Rai, who told me a wonderful story about dreaming of a particular crystal on a particular riverbank, and how she went. The next day she dreamt and she walked miles and miles until she found this river, and then she climbed down onto the riverbank, and exactly underneath this hollowed out space she reached her hand in and pulled out the crystal. And she told me how this crystal had helped with all sorts of journeys and giving information and wisdom. So the stones that the shaman pick up, you can see this one's extremely warm and with some form of working like a V cut into it here. The stones are also sometimes picked up at sacred sites. So they do a lot of pilgrimages, and they treat that as a sort of initiation process. So the shaman will quite often walk all over Nepal, or they go into India or into Tibet or Bhutan or Sikkim, and they're visiting these the temples and sacred trees and particular rocks. But they also have their own landscape of magical places. So they'll go to Mount Kailash, they'll go to particular lakes, and sometimes they find stones or crystals from those locations, and they then use the energy of the place to tune in and to pull that energy into their rituals. I have a practice where I've been collecting the wild honey, the hallucinogenic crazy honey, and I find if I have a tiny bit of it, even the village honey actually, I sometimes can see the landscape almost from a sort of bee's eyes view, and I do some journeying like that using a shaman knife that I put the honey on the edge of the knife, and I also use the porcupine quills to go on a journey like that. So these are the crystals. Sometimes you find all sorts of other objects in the bottoms of the baskets, things that need repair and so on. So these are a type of small, maybe they're muntjac, they're small antelope or small deer things, and you can see that this is where I tried to restring something, and I did a ritual test with drumming and trance, and the whole mala exploded. So I hadn't done it correctly. So I now have to redo it again. But you can see here how they've used the Rudraska to hold the. So I was restringing it in the traditional way. So you've got the holes. Then they use the Rudraska to pull down inside the antelope horn so that it doesn't slide along. So I left that intact. I'm going to have to redo this again. And on there is a little copper bead, and these are all 5-sided Rudraska for the teaching aspect of Shiva. So there was also a mala that had been broken that should have 108 pieces. So I'll restring that using all the Rudraska beads. Hopefully I'll have enough. Then there are wild boar tusks, and you can see there's traces of tikka still, the holes where they've been bored out. They're pretty old. You can see that they've been well used and probably hundreds of years old and passed down. Then there was some pieces of snake vertebrae. Now these, because there's not many of them, they probably weren't from a Naga mala, they're probably part of another mala. So sometimes you'll intersperse the Rudraska and the snake vertebrae and the black soap nut. So the soap nut is also for protection and for cleaning, and so there's enough pieces here to make something. So I need to go into meditation and then see what we can create. So this is a very interesting piece. This is a folded over piece of forged iron in the shape of an axe head. That's some sort of ritual protective amulet that would go on a mala, probably as the bottom piece, or sometimes at the back they have like a piece of iron guarding the back. So that's very nice to find. And then there are little bits of what looks like stone but extremely light, and they float in water. I have no idea what that is. There's a few pieces. I haven't thrown them away. There were sometimes you find pieces which are completely broken and which are so badly damaged that that there's no way to retrieve them in any way, and I usually dispose of them in a type of ceremonial way. So I don't just throw them out with the rubbish. I'll burn them in the fire, and maybe with some sort of ritual. Here as well you have another tusk, really nice and warm, and also with a hole in it where it could be strung. Little bits of ironwork. That probably belongs to this bell chain. And a tiger bell. These are traditional bells from Tibet, and quite rare and also quite valuable. So that would have been part of a bell chain. It's unusual to find it separate, made out of cast bronze, and there were 3 of those in this kit. Very nice sounds. And there was also some 3 slip bells, which are for the feminine, also forged in, so cast and then hand hammered in bronze. One agate bead. So this is the same type of stone that they make the Z stones out of. Again, very, very old. Interesting to find that in amongst the pieces, and it's probably come from a quite a complex mala that has then completely fallen to bits. So this is why it's very, very important to keep all the things together. Little bit of fabric, and a couple of glass beads, and more naga vertebrae. So when you string those, you need to like orientate them the right way around, and then try and get them in sequence. It's almost impossible now to get them in sequence, but I can at least put them in a sort of ascending order. So smaller towards the tail, and one little red bead. So that's the stuff that came out of the bottom of the basket. When the basket is empty, it's quite often used as a temporary altar. So both this piece they'll fill with rice, or the people being healed will give offerings to the shaman. So the shaman are quite often not paid in money; they're paid in chickens and rice and little gifts. Sometimes, if it's in a village context, a little bit of exchange of work, but very, very rarely cash. And that's actually one of the problems in sort of modern day Nepali shamanism, that the young people, firstly, shamanism's a long apprenticeship and it's hard to do, and with some sorts of dangers, but there's very little prospect of earning anything from it. So, and the shaman often don't ask as well. So the healing itself is a gift, and the person being healed or the family being helped then reciprocate. So the whole thing operates in a gift culture. So it becomes difficult if you want a motorbike or an iPhone or your books for your kids to go through school. So a lot of the young are now avoiding it. So what to do next? This next. This needs a bit of repair, but all the ironwork is this is used for dance and for trance, and the iron bells are often for both the cooling positive ancestors and positive spirits, and also for scaring off negative spirits, scaring off witches or bakshis, protection from negative magic. So you've got these sort of sun designs, and you probably in amongst that there would be moons. I'm not sure what that shape means. So there's quite often crescent moons, and then yeah, that shape I've not come across before, so I'm not sure what that is. Geometric squares, so they would all have some sort of symbolic meaning. These are interesting. They're obviously a particular shape, like almost like leaves. So this would usually have that would usually have a whole load of other things. So some of these have almost certainly come unstitched from the front. So the fronts of these are quite often decorated with wild boar tusks, and sometimes with cowrie shells, and quite often with other bits of animal as well. So you can see we've got some traces of cowrie shell where it had some form of hand woven fabric on the front here. This gives you a little bit of an indication of the age, because you can see even this is completely hand woven and now completely rotted away. Actually quite substantial to have these bells, and then that would need, so when I repair this, you can see it's got some hooks, so that goes around the waist, and then this would need a hook, and this end also would need a hook, and they go over the shoulders like a sort of bib and brace, and then that hooks on. Oh yeah, you can see a little bit of, tiny bit of traces of carry still. So this needs a bit of care and a little bit of repair, but so it's still got the iron buckle, and it's got the iron hook. So next thing, this is the shaman dress, and it was absolutely filthy, and I've washed it. So that's the skirt. Some different traditions have a one piece where they have this. Here's the one piece. So that's like it's a hugely pleated, masses and masses of hand woven fabric, hand woven cotton, very very soft. Again, it was really dirty because they don't have washing machines and things, and they tend to do the ritual, and then they straighten them out, and then they twist them like so. You can see this wraps around sort of Tibetan style, and then it's worn with a big sash. That's like an underskirt, and then that's the sash that goes around the waist, and into that get tucked various other weapons like a big cookery knife and sometimes the furber, and that's the headscarf. So very very nice to have all those bits together, and then you can see we've got this very nice sort of, I think it might be a rattan, it's some sort of wicker basket with the lid that fits tightly over the top. Sometimes usually these get passed on to another family member or to a student. They don't really come on the market very often, and sometimes I've seen them in amongst the tamang and the sherpa, where the basket will actually be in the funeral ground, and I've done a whole load of meditation in the funeral grounds with my teacher Magar, and you have the shaman pull the spirits, and you have to stay very steady while the ghosts do their stuff. So this is the headdress. This might help me identify it a little bit more. It needs cleaning up a bit. It's just on that edge where it's almost too badly damaged to actually use. But these are eagle feathers. You probably would have another headband around there, and that ties round like this. I'll make another video where we dress up a Nepali, because I'm a bit too big for that. These were 2 furber that came with it. Very very warm. You've got the same designs with the triple world, so the underworld, the middle world of man, and the upper world of the gods. So here you've got a bird that might be Garuda or might be the crow. The crow is often seen as a messenger, like helping the shaman. This is unusual because it's got four faces. That's a really simplified version of the Vajra, like a thunderbolt. Faces here, Naga patterns here. I'm not sure what that is. It could be a human, but maybe all the Naga have worn out on the point here. This one, much more complicated, very worn. From the ends get worn as they stab down into the ground, as they pin down negative energy, as they use for destroying sort of negative mashan, or for casting out the illness. Sometimes there are spirits that have brought the illness and made someone sick. But maybe there was something attached in the top here, maybe some sort of iron loop with other fabric attached. Very nicely carved. You've got the Naga here for the Kundalini, like a rising sun and a bird. The spiral represents both the Naga and infinity and time, and sometimes also the trunk of Ganesh. Shaman dancing shaman figures here. The trident and the sun. This is too worn for me to really work it out. Very nice. And then you've got the Vajra, so the seed beginning, and then duality, and then the idea that the void runs through the centre, and then the gods at the top. So, and here is it's like a bird beak, and it represents the hornbill or Garuda, and that's an altarpiece. So that would be used as a way of assisting the shaman in his journeys and flights in the upper world. Then this is a piece that I've already repaired. So the two pieces were in the basket. So you've got a piece of deer horn. This was extremely stinky, and it's still a bit stinky. I've washed it once and dried it. This blade is very unusual because it's serrated, so it's a shamanic sickle for gathering herbs, but they also use for cleaning the etheric body, for extraction of different things, for pulling out negative energy in the body. So very nice, and the fabric also is like the rainbow, so it's a bridge from one world to another. Then this is, I've never seen this as a bracelet before. I've seen these as individual pieces on malas. It's a form of seed pod. I'm not sure from what animal, but it looks like cobra fangs, so it probably has an association with Nagas, but that's something I need to check, and it's an object I've not had before. And you see all on these hand-woven string. Then shaman knife, used for healing, for energizing things, for energizing water, and with the deer horn handle. These are very nice, and again unusual to have the sort of container. So this is for holding porcupine quills, and inside a whole load of porcupine quills. Some of them eaten by woodworm, but still quite nice. So these are magic arrows for sending in different rituals. You can actually use them for good and for bad, like any weapon, I suppose. So there's a form of magic you can use where you're using the hallucinogenic honey, and you can send them to kill people. But you can also use them to defend something. So quite often on the front of the crowns, you'll have a ring of porcupine quills across the forehead as a sort of guard. They divide the porcupine quills up into different types. So, and they think of the porcupine as being related to the birds, because the quills are similar to bird quills. So here you can see another bamboo container full of porcupine quills. Very, very nice to have that. And you see the age where it's, and smoky coloured from many, many years of activity. Then there was this extraordinary knife which I've cleaned up. It was in terrible condition, and it has a rising sun. It was the only one of its kind that I've ever seen like that, and this handle as well, very, very unusual. So now this is an X crown, and it's been tied around with string made from sort of plant fibre. Now it would be used as a sort of shamanic brush. So because it was a powerful object, and it's still now a ritual object. So it's used for cleaning. For quite often they'll make a great big ritual, maybe a ritual offering, maybe with coloured powders, rice powder and red and yellow and white, and offerings maybe to the gods. So or offerings to the negative spirits, and they tempt out the negative spirits from a person with all these offerings of like a pretend farm made of vegetables, for instance. And then when the spirit has come out to accept this offering, they suddenly take the person away and cut the cord that connects the person to the offering and destroy everything. So they then destroyed the gift that they gave to the negative spirit, and also either sent the spirit away or tempted the spirit out and then destroy it. So that would be used for that sort of activity, for suddenly sweeping everything away, and with this sort of ancient and empowered X crown now turned into a sort of shaman broom. That had feathers. It's hard to say. I mean, you can see this is right on that edge where it's like what to do with it, but it's still interesting because you can see it was designed for something. Probably has some sort of magical stuff inside. Was the remains of wild chicken feathers. Again, this I've never had in a shaman pack again before. This is and it needs a clean and some woodworm treatment. It's a shamanic mirror used for ritual. So really, really interesting. But I need to look after that and get some woodworming treatment on it quickly. Very nice bell chain with two deer skins, two deer horns, and with the mostly open bells for the child. This one's a cross for the male, and that male probably should have all male bells, male and child bells. So it should have at least one female bell there. Probably that one that's been broken. And on a forged iron chain. It's very, very nice. It's a shaman arm bone trumpet, which you play. I'm not skilled at playing these, so I won't blow it, but it makes a very shrill sort of type of tone. And that's, you can see it's very old and very, very worn and in nice condition. So usually a senior shaman, before they die, bequeath, if they want to be used like this, they'll bequeath their arms or legs or even their skull to be used as ritual objects. So it's a way of carrying the spirit of a teacher through into the objects for the next generations. So this might be many, many hundreds of years old, and obviously cared for as in their sacreds. So another bell. Probably this is connected to that, I would guess. It's a bronze bell, but with forged iron tongue. That's a traditional Magar drum stick. So you have the open back drum. The drum wasn't with it, but very nice with the praying figure for drumming. These are very collectible now, and unfortunately so many of them have been collected away that even when you find the drums, you quite often don't find the sticks. So it had a variety of other sticks with it, which is pretty unusual. And these, because everything here is Magar. This is a traditional Magar stick, But this shape of a stick is more for the dengaroo, you know, with the drums with the long handles. You can see this has been in use recently because it's got electrician's tape around the end. The stick is obviously old. That's probably been used within the last 20 years. And it came with two other sticks like that. So these are designed ergonomically to wrap around the drum, but they also represent the snake. The three different ones. So these were in the basket. So there should be two other bell chains, and there are. So I can see the shaman was pretty small, if that went over his head and across his shoulders. Both these are unusual because there's so many open bells, and then with the single cross or double cross ones. And both of them had one iron bell and the others all bronze. But you can see that's used for a trance when they're down. And no, there's still some more things there. This is a mala with a soap nut. So soap nut is really interesting. It's you can literally make a type of soap out of it, but it's very good for skin diseases. And my teacher Mohan Rai had medical records of someone that he'd healed from skin cancer using soap nut, a mixture of soap nut and other shamanic practices, and it from a German, one of his German students, and he had all the medical records of this person who was sort of in the late stages of skin cancer, and then completely cured. And when the person was ill, they were like a teenager, and they're now like a 20-30 years on and still in perfect health. So that would be worth digging into at some point. So yeah, we have a Rudraska at the end, and then these are used for protection and for healing, for cleaning the energy body as well. One way that you can recognise shaman when they're in their sort of normal dress is they'll be wearing these sometimes, or usually, and normal people don't wear them. So, and then that was in the basket. Again, this is unusual because it's really similar to the type of protective amulets that you get amongst the Nuar. It's with a variety of seeds, and these are usually used to protect children from illnesses. It's got a yak's tooth and lots of other seeds, various beads and things. Interesting object. I think probably not from the shamanic tradition, but amongst the stuff. So it was one of the belongings of the shaman, and but quite often there's a lot of crossover as well between different groups. So I know Rai and Tamang and Sherpa shaman that are and Gurung shaman that are all working together. So sometimes you get the crossover of objects. So a little bit unusual, but I think it's for protecting children from childhood illness. And then one very, very small Nagamala. Whether that would be doubled up and used as a bracelet, it's probably a little bit too small to put on someone's head, but very interesting. It looks like it's been retied, so it might have been bigger, and then just mended and continued to be used, and that's everything. So quite often the shaman will use the boxes as a temporary altar. So they'll put rice in that, and then they'll stick their ferbers and various other objects in the rice. They'll have and this as well. They'll fill up, and then they'll have like this is a temporary altar, and with flowers and various other things in it. I would have expected maybe like a copper water vessel, maybe a bamba, and a small copper water vessel in amongst this lot, and at least one drum. But it's really pretty complete. You can see it needs some repair. It needs a little bit of care and attention before it would be fully used for someone. But I'll try and keep all this stuff together because it belonged to one person, and it's probably the result of generations and generations of shaman, passing their objects down through the generations. And then unfortunately sometimes you don't have any kids that want to become the shaman, or there's no one in their village who have the power, and then the things fall out of use. And one of my interests is to find ways to get the sacred objects back into use again with other people. So and it's very nice for Western shaman to have access to real ritual objects that have been used and empowered, because they have a tremendous energy to them and a sort of vitality. So for me, all these things become teaching objects, and objects that hold their own wisdom and information, and they have their own memory. So you imagine this, it's a shaman's arm from probably a few hundred years ago, and it's been used in hundreds and hundreds of rituals, plus also it belonged to someone who had kindly donated it. So it's extraordinary, the sense of lineage that comes through these objects. So I hope you found that interesting and useful. Do subscribe, press the bell button if you want notifications, and I'll see you at the next one. Thank you.